Hello, friends. I'm Amy Roberts from raisingarrows.net, and this is the Raising Arrows podcast, which is all about managing your large family home and homeschool. Welcome, friends. This is Amy from raisingarrows.net, and this is episode number 137, $100 a week grocery budget. I think I mentioned in a previous episode, but I'm not sure if I did, about the fact that we were doing a $100 a week grocery budget in January. I may have mentioned it somewhere else. I have the blog and the videos and the podcast, and sometimes I don't intersect those very well. So anyway, if I didn't mention it here, I'm mentioning it now, and I'm going to tell you about how we did it, how it went, what I would change if I would do it again, and some things that I learned about myself and about our stockpile that were very eye-opening and interesting to me and a little bit humbling. So let's get started. But first, I want to share with you a brand new book called A Faithful Father. It's a coming-of-age story about a 16-year-old girl named Kate. Her family, which has always been close, is threatened by her dad's marriage to a literal stranger. Through her journey, she learns valuable lessons about how to deal with conflict and hardship with God's help. Kate learns that her value comes from Him alone, and that when everything else in life is shaking, He is always faithful. You know how difficult it is to come by clean fiction these days. This is a book that is appropriate for the entire family, and the main characters all seek to honor God in the things that they do. It is a high value for family and plenty of humor to make this a book that's great for all ages. So go check that out on Amazon. You'll find the link in the show notes. It is $9.99 in paperback, and it's actually free through Kindle Unlimited if you read that way. So go check out A Faithful Father. You will not be disappointed. All right, so first of all, why we decided to do this. And I think I need to add a disclaimer here. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know I have an episode on the fact that we stockpile, and we started stockpiling back in August of 2021 for various reasons. That's podcast number 131. So that hasn't been all that long ago. The funny thing is, from the time I recorded that podcast until I wrote a corresponding post on the blog, which just recently went out, things changed. And the biggest thing that changed was how I maintain that stockpile. And that's because of this $100 a week grocery challenge that we did. I changed up how I do things with that stockpile. So I'd encourage you to listen to the podcast, but also to skim through the post and see the different things that have changed. But to give you some background as to why we decided to do this challenge, Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead does a pantry challenge every year. And she has this fantastic homestead, and she has a fully functional pantry that's full of all these things that she's canned and freeze dried, and it's really, really fantastic. I don't have quite that level, but the reason she does the pantry challenge is to get some of those things off her shelves in order to make room for the next growing season. And it's a really neat concept, and it's a really great way to save money. However, I don't have quite as robust of a system as she has, but I've learned so much from her that I decided I would do a variation of what she was doing. And instead I would do $100 a week grocery budget for the month of January and see if we could do it and see if we could save some money, because we'd had a bunch of bills that came in toward the end of 2022 that had really depleted our savings, and we were needing to build that savings back up. And the fastest way we could think of to build that savings was to really slash the grocery budget. And I figured with the stockpile in place, I could use what I already had on hand, and I could manage to do $100 a week or thereabouts if I was just really, really careful with our budget. Now, to give you a little bit of an idea of what a big swing this would be for me, typically I was going to Aldi and Walmart in any given week. I was spending between $250 and $300 at Aldi, and then I was going to Walmart and spending around $100 there to finish out food and toiletries. Sometimes we were also going to a local scratch and dent and spending close to $100 there, and sometimes we were also going and picking up meat deals at our local Kroger or our commissary, and also spending, between $50 and $100 at those stores. So there were sometimes weeks where we might be spending more like $500 or $600 on groceries and toiletries and extras. And I tend to not separate out the food. I've never been somebody who just really keeps a close tab on the food versus the extras, because it's all one bill and it's all money. And so when I go to Walmart and I maybe buy some food and then I'm also, buying a hairbrush, I will just put it all together. It's all expenditures. And I feel like it kind of just all goes together into one pot. So that's how I deal with that. And that's probably not the best way to do it. But when I'm talking about how much we're spending at those places, that's other things involved, not just food. We're not spending $600 a week on food. However, I am finding, stock up prices on like bacon or beef or chicken at these other places. And when I find good prices, I want to go ahead and get those. So some weeks, yes, we would be spending quite a bit more. However, for this challenge, I was only going to spend $100 a week no matter what it was. That meant no Amazon, no going to Walmart and spending extra there, no picking up a little something at Starbucks. It was going to be $100 a week. So part of this plan was to look at my stockpile, see what I had already in the freezers and the pantry, and make a very tight meal plan. We typically have the same things for breakfast and lunch, so I wrote down what we had and then made sure we had those things on hand. And then I made out 7 different meals for Monday or Sunday through Saturday. And I was going to only purchase the ingredients that I needed to create those individual meals. So some of the things I already had on hand was powdered milk. We buy this powdered milk called Nido. It's in the Hispanic section of the grocery store. And it is the best powdered milk ever. It is so, so good. You can't tell the difference because I don't really like powdered milk and I'm not a big milk drinker anyway, but we had a can that was needing to be used up. So instead of buying milk, I was using up this powdered milk and we're actually still working on the powdered milk. I had some different meats that were in the freezer that we were able to use. Like I had some stew meat and I had some chicken and some other things along those lines that ended up being meals because we already had those things on hand. So I don't want you to think that my $100 a week grocery budget had to carry everything that was in the meal plan because we're talking, any given night, it's 9 to 10 people or more eating here at the house. And so I don't want you to think that $100 was going to work if I didn't have a stockpile. I had different things that I was able to pull from and make these meal plans out of, but I was very, very tight with the meal plan. I was going to make those meals. I was not going to have the ingredients to make something that was off plan. Everything was going to be there that I needed to make each of those meals, and I just had to stick with the meal plan. And that's probably my first eye-opening experience, was the fact that I was going off meal plan a lot previously. It's a busy day. I think we'll just have nachos. I can't think of anything else to do. Let's just have sandwiches. And I decided that I was going to stick to this meal plan no matter what. And I did. I did not initially assign meals to every single day, but as I went, I put the meals into my planner on a day that made sense. And sometimes I'd rearrange them, but I was very, very careful to make sure that I made every single meal I wrote down and that I had all of those ingredients and that I didn't deviate from the plan and say, oh, well, I just don't feel like doing that, and putting something else in its place that was not on the list. Now, this did cause our stockpile to be brought down quite a bit, and I'll talk about that here in a minute as one of the lessons learned and something that we are going to do differently with that stockpile. But once I made this menu plan, then I decided to go to only one store. I was not going to go to multiple stores, and I made the conscious decision to not go to Aldi at all. I did step foot in Aldi, I think, one time during this challenge. It was an absolute disaster. I ended up putting things in my cart that I did not need and spending money that I really just should not have spent. I should have just gone in and gotten the one thing I thought I had to have. And instead, I went up and down the aisles and I ended up buying dish soap that I didn't need, because when I go into Aldi, I just put things in the cart, things that we typically use And, whether we need it that week or not, I don't really pay a lot of attention. Thus the reason my bill at Aldi typically is $250 to $300 a week. I know what we use. I know what we like. And that was the reason I did not want to go to Aldi, because my shopping habits there have become habits. They're things that I just do. I just walk down the aisle and I'm like, okay, this we always use and this we always use. And I'm not checking to make sure we actually needed those things. I'm just grabbing them because I think we need them. And if we don't need them today, we'll use them next week, because that's a food that we always get at Aldi. So I decided I really wanted to change things up and only shop one store. Another reason I didn't want to go to Aldi was because Aldi has those middle aisles where they have those enticing special buys and all those things that I don't really need, but I think I need, and I buy them because they're a good price. And again, me not thinking, me not checking the budget, me just throwing things into the cart is not a good idea when you're doing a $100 a week challenge. So I chose not to go to Aldi so that I would not accidentally spend more than I needed to spend. And in doing so, I actually chose to go to stores that are more expensive. I went to our commissary, which is a military grocery store. And I also went to our local Kroger. And then one time I went to Walmart, and that was okay, but I probably just stick to the local Kroger and the commissary, because in doing so, even though it was a little bit more expensive, I was able to stay more focused because there weren't extra things and I wasn't used to shopping those stores. So I wasn't just throwing things in the cart. I had to be much more cognizant of my budget as I shopped those stores, and it actually helped me to stick with my budget. So as I went through the stores with my very tight meal plan and my nice little grocery list, I made sure that I was counting. I was keeping track of exactly how much I was spending as I went through the store. And that gave me the ability to remove things from my cart that I needed to take out because they were either too expensive, I could do something different, or I just simply realized there was no way I was going to make that big of a part of my budget. For instance, eggs skyrocketed during this time frame, and I decided that I needed to use less eggs. So rather than getting like a bunch of eggs like I had planned, I decided to do something different. Another thing I did was when we were making these Mediterranean bowls, I was going to buy tzatziki sauce and I couldn't find any. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to go to another store. I'll just use ranch. It'll be fine. So it allowed me to make decisions in the store that were the best for our budget because I was counting as I went. One time I ran across a vegetable thing that I was going to be getting, and I put it in the cart and I wheeled it around for a while, and I thought, you know what? That's too expensive. I can do this a better way. And so I went and got the individual vegetables that actually was a better deal. So keeping track as I shopped helped me to skip anything that was going to break my budget, change out things that I didn't necessarily need, and just make overall good decisions. And then the last kind of rule that I had to go along with this monthly shopping challenge was that I was not going to buy any extras. That meant I wasn't buying toilet paper, paper towels, any sort of paper goods at all. I wasn't going to a lot of extra stores. I was going to the one store, and I was not buying anything that I would consider extra. So that meant that we weren't really buying much off of Amazon other than birthday presents, which I will tell you about here in a second. And I was not going to those stores where they had more things than just food because that was too much of a temptation. We already had a stockpile of toilet paper and paper towels, so it was not that big of a deal, but it did whittle down our stockpile. Now, the birthday presents thing, that's because in the month of January, we have 4 out of the 12 birthdays. And so just about every single week, there is a birthday in January. My husband at first said, don't worry about putting the birthday foods into the grocery budget. But for the most part, I was able to put the birthday foods into the grocery budget, and it came out just fine. As far as not spending anything on extras, I did go ahead and buy some things off of Amazon for birthday stuff, and I did buy paper plates that were colored for the kids' birthdays, the younger kids' birthdays. So I did do some extras like that, but my husband was like, let's not put that into the grocery budget. You know, we'll just make that an extra thing that's okay because it's birthday season for us. Now, the first week I spent $98. The second week I spent $95. The third week I spent $125, and that's because about $25 of that was a meat deal that I ran across. And then the last week, I honestly cannot remember what I spent. I'm pretty sure I went over though, but I just don't remember what I spent, and I don't have receipts here to tell you, but I think I did pretty good. And all in all, we think we probably managed to save between $600 to $1,000 in the month of January simply by having a budget, having a very strict meal plan, sticking to it, and not buying the extras. So what did this teach me, you might ask? Well, the first thing that I noticed as I was going through the store is that I am used to seeing something that I think my family would like to eat and putting it in the cart and driving on. And because I had this very strict grocery budget, I couldn't do that. I couldn't just throw things into the cart. I told you when I'm in Aldi, I'm just like putting stuff in that I know that we typically buy. Well, even at the commissary where I was finding things that I was like, oh, my family would like that. Oh, that would be fun to try. There wasn't the space in the budget for those things to be in my cart. And so I chose not to put them in the cart. And I realized just how accustomed I have become to just putting things in the cart, not thinking about it, not considering, do I really need this? Is this really important to our budget? I also realized I have not had a very good meal plan. I also learned some really big lessons about our stockpile. Again, the podcast on stockpiling is number 131. The biggest takeaway I had about our stockpile is how I maintain it. And that is something that I have totally changed and revamped since I recorded the podcast on stockpiling. I have decided to go to a 6-month rotation. I've decided to go to a 6-month stockpile instead of a 9 to 12-month stockpile because there are foods that we just are not eating like I thought we would. And I also don't think I want to try to top off my stockpile every single time I go shopping. And I think that was what was contributing to the exorbitant amount of money I was spending on groceries because every single week I was trying to top off that stockpile. So instead, what I'm planning right now is to take a month every 6 months and top off the stockpile then, and then let it dwindle back down. I also got my master weekly grocery list, which I'll link to in the show notes. And I made notes next to each item on that list as to how many of those things I would need in a 6-month stockpile. And that way, when I go to look through my stockpile to make my 6-month stock up list, I can see, do I have 10 of these chocolate chips? Do I have X amount of whatever this is, all the peanut butter, the salsa, whatever it is? Do I have those particular numbers? So I have a better grasp now. Having done this stockpile for a while and then doing this grocery challenge, I realized that topping that stockpile off all the time is just not very budget friendly. So I am going to stop doing that. And so in February here, we've been topping off the stockpile, and then I'll do it again in August. Now, that does not mean if I find a great meat deal or something like that, that I'm not going to go ahead and use some of that budget for that. I'm absolutely going to do that, but I'm not going to try to keep the stockpile topped off at all times. That's just too much money every single week. So there you have it. That's what we did. That's how I made $100 a week work for our budget. I would absolutely do it again. I think it worked out really well. I did have to think pretty hard in the grocery store, but only going to one store really helped that, and making sure that it was a store that didn't have anything extra to make me look around and be tempted to buy. That was a really good thing. And then just making that really tight meal list where it was like, I am only going to make these meals. That really helped as well. So yes, it was totally doable. I would totally do it again. And I hope you will try some sort of challenge of your own, even if it's, I'm not going to buy these things during the month of March, or I'm going to try to only spend this much for our family. It can be any number that you think is reasonable. Start with a goal and really try to do that and see how it works for you. You can always tweak it. You don't have to make it a rule. It doesn't have to be the same thing all the time, but try it for 1 week. See what happens. Try it for 2 weeks and see what happens. And if you can make it last for a month, good on you. But it's really helpful to have little challenges like that for ourselves, just to kind of stretch and grow as homemakers. And then also to find those places, those weaknesses, those chinks in our armor, those things that we could do better. That was what I learned from this. There are so many things that I can do better, so many ways that I can save more money, be more effective, be more efficient. And so I am actually super excited to move forward with a better grocery budget in 2023. Now, before I go, I want to be sure to remind you to check out the book, A Faithful Father. This is good, clean, God-honoring fiction for you and your children. Please go check that out on Amazon. I have the link down in the show notes, and have a blessed week, my friends.